Imagine you can't tell the difference between food and poison. One wrong bite and game is over. If you call a stone an apple, does it change what the stone really is? Does the word change reality? A name is just a sound, but a mistake in logic can break your teeth and your world. Your life depends on one invisible rule. Logic. Part 1. Law of identity. This rule is known as the law of identity. It is the most fundamental rule of logic. The idea is very simple. A equals A. A watermelon is a watermelon. A cat is a cat. One thing is never two different things. It is the base of everything we do. Logic is made of 3 simple rules, which are easy to remember and use in your daily life. However, most people don't know these basic rules and don't use them for their own benefit. The primary law of logic is the law of identity. It's more than just an axiom or a rule. It is the fundamental core of everything we do. Without it, nothing we do would make any sense. Without following the law of identity, communication between people breaks down, and reasoning becomes impossible. Let's dive deeper into the law of identity and see how it works in various situations through examples. Situation 1. Each thing at any moment is equal to itself and cannot be anything else. One thing is not two different things. For example, a cat is a cat. It cannot be both a cat and a dog at the same time. Situation 2. Every term within a conversation must have only one single meaning. If a term has several meanings, it ceases to mean anything at all. For example, if we discuss a mouse, we must decide, are we talking about the animal or the computer tool? Situation 3. A term cannot have a floating meaning within a single context. We must discuss one specific thing, otherwise reasoning becomes impossible. For example, it's wrong to use orange as a fruit and then switch to it being a color within the same argument. Here is an example of such a sentence. An orange is a healthy fruit. Your car is orange. Therefore, your car is healthy. Situation 4. During a discussion, a thought must be identical to itself from beginning to end. For example, when a mom asks you to pick up your toys, she's talking specifically about toys, not dishes or clothes. Situation 5. A thought must be one specific thing to exist. If it changes while you are thinking it, the thought doesn't exist, only mental noise remains. For example, it's like looking for your reflection in rough water. Until the surface calms down, you see only chaos. A thought must be clear to even exist. Situation 6. 2 items are identical if absolutely all their characteristics match. If there is no difference at all, then there aren't 2 separate items. For example, when 2 passwords use identical characters in the same sequence, it's the same password. It seems simple, right? But this tiny rule holds our entire world together. Let's look deeper and start from the very beginning. History. So where did this law come from? Its history is rooted in antiquity. A man named Aristotle formulated his vision of correct thinking and called it formal logic. He described the core of the law of identity in his work Metaphysics this way.
To have not one meaning is to have no meaning at all. If words have no meaning, our reasoning with one another, and indeed with ourselves, has been lost. It is impossible to think of anything without thinking of one specific thing.
Aristotle said that even though our world is always changing, for a thought to be true, the meaning of a word must be frozen in a specific time and place. He called this law the Axiom of Axioms, the most certain start for any thought. You don't need to prove this law because every proof already depends on it. This foundation was so powerful that 2,000 years later, Immanuel Kant noted that logic had not moved a single step forward since Aristotle described these rules. Aristotle created his laws of logic as an instrument for his own regular use. This tool was a strong defense against sophists, professional speakers, who manipulated word meanings in a debate to confuse their opponent and win. Aristotle called anyone who ignored the law of identity already like plant. He said,
Such a person makes sounds, but there is no meaning in them.
World cultures. Did this law belong to only one culture? Absolutely not. Wise men across the globe saw this as the foundation of the world's existence. In ancient China, the law of identity transformed into the socio-political and ethical doctrine of Zhongming, known as the rectification of names. Confucius saw the cause of social chaos in words losing their connection to reality.
Order is only possible when the name of a thing is strictly equal to the thing itself.
In ancient Egypt, the law of identity was the concept of Mat, also known as the universal order. For an Egyptian, truth was defined by how closely an object aligned with its original ideal prototype. If an object deviates from its true nature, universal harmony is broken. In India, the Nyaya school developed a strict step-by-step system for finding the truth. The primary method involved defining the unique features that make an item different from the world around it. They believe that if an object is not identical to its unique feature, it becomes invisible to the mind. The Persian philosopher Ibn Sina believed that humans are born with this knowledge. According to him, the mind cannot operate without the pre-installed concept that a thing equals itself. He viewed this formula as a core function of the human mind. Logical fallacies. Breaking the law of identity can happen on purpose. The ancient Greeks called these tricks sophisms. Aristotle and his followers organized these errors into a clear system to help people identify these fallacies. Let's look at some types of intentional manipulations and how exactly they confuse our reasoning. Equivocation fallacy occurs when we are using the same term to mean different things. For example, if you say knowledge is power and then power corrupts, the conclusion that knowledge corrupts is logically wrong. Here, the word power first means ability and then authority. That's why the chain of reasoning is broken. Amphibole fallacy is a confusion caused by a double meaning in a sentence's structure. For example, the phrase, "the chicken is ready to eat," could mean the bird wants food or it is the food. Without a fixed meaning, the phrase is just noise. The false identity fallacy happens when differences between categories are ignored. If you own a dog and this dog is a father, concluding that the dog is your father is wrong. In this case, the ownership is wrongly treated as a biological relationship. Composition fallacy happens when properties of a single part of the thing are attributed to the whole thing. For example, if every brick in a wall is small, that doesn't mean the whole wall is small. What is true for one element is not necessarily true for the entire structure. Division fallacy occurs when we assume that what is true for the group must be true for every member. If a country is considered rich, it doesn't mean that every citizen is personally rich. You cannot assume that every piece of a machine shares the same qualities as the machine itself. Accident fallacy happens when a temporary state is confused with a permanent essence. For example, if someone slept for a few hours this afternoon, concluding that they are a lazy person who never works is wrong. The mistake is presenting a specific episode as a person's entire identity. Ignoratio elenchi fallacy occurs when someone ignores the actual argument and instead proves a different fact that is irrelevant. For example, Imagine a dialogue where a teacher talks to a student. The teacher says,
"You didn't finish your homework."
the student replies,
But I cleaned my room and helped my mom with the dishes.
the pupil simply shifted attention to another fact that is easier to prove to avoid answering. Secundum quid fallacy is when some people take a rule from a special circumstance and try to apply it to everything. For example, you hear this phrase,
It is safe to drive 70 miles per hour on a highway. Therefore, it is safe to drive 70 miles per hour on a highway in a thick fog.
The reasoning in this statement is wrong. A safe speed on a clear road is not identical to that same speed in thick fog. The world without identity. You may think, stop, this is just ancient Greek philosophy, but real life doesn't always work that way. Well, let's take a look at what we would lose if we had decided to ignore the law of identity a long time ago.
Mathematics.
First of all, we wouldn't have mathematics at all. In math, the number 5 is equal to 5. Always. Everywhere. 5 is 5, not about 5, or 5 depending on how you feel. When x is set to 5 in a problem, x stays 5 until the very end. Mathematics is completely impossible without this law. If we decide that 5 can equal 7 or 9, then goodbye math, we don't need you anymore.
Geometry.
Right after mathematics, we would have problems with geometry. Imagine you are proving a theorem about a triangle, and suddenly the word line starts to mean circle. Without strictly fixed definitions, the entire proof turns into nonsense. Geometry is more than just drawings, it is pure spatial logic. Without the law of identity, even a plain square is impossible to describe because its corners would try to be something different.
Engineering.
Suppose you hired an engineer to construct a bridge over the river near your home. The engineer calculated that M8 bolts should be used to hold the beams together. But the guy doing the actual work decided an M6 bolt is just like an M8 and put the bridge together with M6 bolts instead. Some time has passed and construction is complete. You arrive to check out the finished job. You step onto the bridge and it collapses. Exactly like the whole point of engineering without the law of identity.
Computers and software.
What about the games and programs on your smartphone or PC? Electronic devices are the world's biggest fans of the law of identity. If a 1 isn't equal to 1 anymore, every program will just stop working. Without this rule, processors won't work, which means no computers, no internet, no smartphones, and no gaming systems. At this point, someone will surely say, well, we didn't have all this before, and people lived fine without these things in the past. Let's look at a few more things that are impossible without the law of identity.
Cooking.
Imagine a recipe for a wonderful cake says to add sugar, and the chef thinks the white powder in the salt container is sugar because they both look white. Your cake won't be very delicious with salt. Of course, you'll still have to eat it to satisfy your hunger, but good-tasting food would no longer exist. You just can't prepare a meal or write a recipe if you don't follow this law.
Music.
In music, the note A must always sound at a frequency of 440 Hz. If every musician in a band starts playing their own note that's kind of like an A, the harmony will turn into a horrible noise. Obviously, you won't lose your hearing and sounds will still exist, but making something beautiful out of those noises will be impossible.
Stories and fairy tales.
For ages, people shared knowledge using legends, tales, and stories. But what if every storyteller changed the meaning of a few words? What would that knowledge look like after a few generations? Not only that, even simple stories for kids would stop making sense to us. Suppose we are reading a book to a child where a brave knight suddenly, for no reason, turns into a coward. Or even worse, he turns into a beautiful princess and starts looking for a prince. Would your kid really get anything out of a story like that? A character's identity is the glue that keeps any story together.
Medicine.
Imagine you see a doctor who tells you that you have constipation when you actually have diarrhea. Once he gives you medicine for a problem you don't have, you'll see that this version of healthcare makes no sense. Treating the wrong illness can cause real damage to your health. In medicine, the law of identity is the line between correct treatment and a dangerous mistake.
Outdoor games.
Think of playing hide and seek, and the rules suddenly change right in the middle of it. For example, the person looking for everyone suddenly decides they don't need to close their eyes anymore. Are you ready to play a game like that? But now imagine another game called Mammoth Hunt, where the prize isn't just winning, but a massive amount of food for every member of your village. A game like that has many more rules than hide and seek. If people can't play that game properly, everyone in the tribe is going to go hungry. Any rule in a game is an example of the law of identity in action. Without it, the game doesn't exist. Every player just does whatever they want, and no one understands each other. Tired of examples? Let's look at the last few examples and finish this up.
Law.
Do you want to write a law or sign a contract between people or companies? But how is that possible if everyone understands the words in a way that is best for their own needs? We would lose all contracts and all trust in each other. The law of identity is what makes a piece of paper a strong protection. The whole world economy and our human rights are based on this foundation.
Trade.
Imagine you are going to buy some clothes and being told that clothes are now actually rotten tomatoes. Obviously, you aren't going to buy rotten tomatoes instead of clothes. You'll walk away from that market. Then you'll realize that without being able to buy what you need, trade is dead.
Politics.
Do you want smart and honest leaders for your company or your nation? But how will you know if a politician is smart or honest? If a leader says, freedom is order and war is peace, do those sound like the words of a smart person? Or maybe honest? How can you tell if someone understands anything if they can say whatever they want while meaning something else? How can you identify a lie if they can always say they had a different definition in mind? Without fixed meanings, there is no truth, no lies, and no reason to speak. Identity in the real world. Good. The previous part showed that the law of identity is the core of everything we know. In fact, there would be no civilization at all without it. Now, you might be asking yourself,
why does an ordinary person need to understand this law? We already live without most technical knowledge, and maybe that's for the best.
the truth is, people frequently lie to others for many different reasons. Small lies have become so common that we've stopped paying attention to them. But once you get used to small lies, you might fail to see when everyone starts believing a big one. So, what can we do about it? Knowing the laws of logic makes it much easier to identify when you're being lied to or manipulated. These rules keep your mind clean and lead to a better understanding of how things work. In this section, I want to show you how the law of identity is broken in the real world. Of course, we can't cover every example, but we can look at a few simple ones from different parts of life.
Medical cases.
For example, a doctor might tell you that you have stress, then say it's depression, and later call it anxiety. The problem is that these are different diagnoses requiring different treatments. Stress is a physical reaction. Depression is a clinical disorder, while anxiety is a mental state. Without a fixed diagnosis, a patient can't truly know what they are dealing with. If the treatment is for stress, but the real issue is depression, it simply won't work. Second example, antibiotics do not work on viral infections like the flu. The term antibiotic actually explains this. Anti means against. Biotic refers to bacteria. Why would we think a medicine meant to fight bacteria would be effective against something entirely different? But many people believe antibiotics are a powerful treatment for many illnesses, such as respiratory infections. But that's not true. Viral illnesses are different from bacterial ones. Viruses and bacteria are completely different organisms. It's similar to comparing birds to fish. They are both animals, but it makes no sense to hunt a bird with a fishing rod.
Marketing cases.
You've probably seen bottles of vegetable oil in the store with a cholesterol-free label. You might say,
What's wrong with that? Where's the lie?
actually, it's impossible for vegetable oil to have cholesterol. Cholesterol only exists in animal products. It's not a false statement, but it is a manipulative one. Marketers take a natural trait and present it as a unique benefit, making you feel like other oils are worse. Have you ever heard people say that natural products are safer? If so, someone was trying to mislead you. This phrase confuses origin with safety, which is a logical error. Arsenic and death cap mushrooms are completely natural, but they are definitely not safe. Sometimes a package says no sugar, but if you look closely at the ingredients, you might find concentrated grape juice or honey. Marketers often manipulate things to make their products seem more valuable. The sucrose in honey isn't technically sugar, but biochemically, it has the exact same effect on your body.
Job cases.
You read a job offer mentioning flexible hours, but then you find out you have to be available 24/7. To a person looking for work, flexible means I decide when I work. To the company, flexible often means your time belongs to them whenever they need it. It's the same word, but both sides define it differently. Have you ever heard a boss tell their employees, "We're like a family"? But in a family, you get unconditional support and you don't get fired for bad performance. Business, however, is about making a profit. HR uses the family label to trick you into feeling emotionally tied to the company, so you'll do more for less.
Contract cases. When a bank ad says zero-interest loan, they aren't lying. But don't celebrate just yet. It doesn't mean you won't pay extra. A zero-interest loan doesn't mean a free loan. Most likely, they left out the part about the monthly commissions you'll have to pay. What if a contract says the job will be done in reasonable time? That usually means they can't guarantee a deadline and don't want to be held responsible for delays. But they wouldn't dare say honestly that they won't commit to any specific time. The problem is the specific wording the provider chose to use. Reasonable time sounds like a time limit, but it really just means they'll take as long as they feel is necessary. Relationship cases. We frequently fight about words because we don't agree on their definitions. It usually sounds something like this.
You said it was unfair.
I meant a different kind of unfair.
Until you agree on what unfair actually means, you'll never understand each other. Sometimes someone is rude to you and then says,
I'm just telling the truth.
but honesty has nothing to do with it. Being honest means telling the truth without twisting it. But rudeness is a lack of respect. When someone is rude and says, I'm just honest, they are trying to excuse their bad behavior with a positive trait. Have you ever heard a sentence starting with, a real man should, or a real woman should? But the thing is, biological sex is a fact. Social expectations are just someone's opinion. The trick is in connecting a biological fact to a set of required behaviors that you never actually agreed to.
App cases.
A classic in any app store, the label free app. The word free means you don't have to give anything in return. But app developers try to swap you don't pay money for the word free. In reality, you'll still have to watch ads or let them use your personal info. You shouldn't assume an app is the best just because a lot of people downloaded it. And that doesn't mean the app is bad. This is just about keeping your thinking clear. If you can catch these small differences, you'll find it easier to understand more complex topics. In this case, popularity is not the same as quality. There are many reasons why the best app might have only a few downloads. For example, it might be brand new, or it wasn't advertised at all. There are plenty of fantastic apps with 0 downloads. They'd be perfect for you, but you'll never know they exist.
Political cases.
Politicians are usually very good with words. Their job is to speak in a way that makes people believe in them. They speak in a way that lets every listener hear exactly what they want to hear. There's no point in trying to go through all their tricks. I'll just give you a couple of well-known examples. Take the idea that
if you love your country, you should stand by the government's decisions.
this is a clear manipulation that swaps two different ideas. Patriotism is being equated with loyalty to the current leaders, but these are two different things. You can be a patriot and still criticize the government because you actually care about your country. Another common phrase is,
It's not a lie, it's alternative facts.
a fact is unique by definition, and there can only be one fact for one specific situation. If there's an alternative to a fact, then either it's a completely different subject, or one of them is a lie. Using the word fact to describe a lie is a trick to make you doubt what is real.
Conclusion. In the book of Exodus, God speaks to Moses.
I am that I am.
This is the law of identity in its most beautiful form. We don't realize it, but without the simple axiom that each thing is equal only to itself and nothing else, nothing makes sense. It is the foundation of everything. Without it, we couldn't build spaceships or even have a conversation with each other. Understanding this law is your true superpower. The world will always try to redefine your terms and confuse meanings. Don't let it happen. An error in reasoning almost always begins when a word quietly changes its meaning. Always focus on the essence. Check the facts. And remember, truth is always equal to itself.